Hello, today I will continue to talk about the rules of chess. I will start to talk about the progress of the game. The player with the white tools is the first to play. Each player in turn moves one of the tools in his possession. Only one tool, except in the case of the castling, as I have already shown you. In case of the castling, two tools move at once, like this. Is the small castling, or in case of the long castling, the rook and the king moves. So in the case of castling, two tools moves at one move, the king and the rook. So, and the game continues until a decision is made. The player can move any piece in turn and move it wherever he wants, provided that he doesn't violate the rules for moving the pieces. Also, if a certain player's king is exposed to a threat from an opponent's piece, a situation known as check, the player must do everything in his power to eliminate this situation. If he fails to eliminate the threat, he will lose the game. And actually it will be a state known as checkmate or mate. So when you're threatened by check, yes, for example, this is a check. This is a check situation. The white, uh, the white king is threatened by check by the black bishop. So the white must remove the threat immediately. Any move that doesn't result in this immediately will be illegal. So if it is white's turn, the white doesn't allow to do this move, for example. This is an illegal move. Why? Because the white king is threatened by the bishop, so he must eliminate the threat immediately. Okay? So, for example, in this situation, the white can block the line of the attack of the bishop on the king by moving his pawn from e2 to e3. In this way, he blocks the threat on his king. So the black actually declares a check. In this position, the black declares check, and the white must remove the threat of check immediately by doing this move. Any other move that doesn't remove the threat of check is an illegal move. There is another possibility to remove the threat of check is by going with the rook from d1 to d2. But it will be a legal move, but it is not so good move, because then the black can take this rook and the queen will take the bishop. So as you can see, the white took bishop for rook. So he actually loses 2 points because the bishop is evaluated at 3 points or 3.25, and the rook is evaluated as at 5 points. So the white loses about 2 points. So it is not a good move. And actually, in this situation, the best move for the white is pawn e2 to move it to e3 to block the threat of chess. In addition to this, any move that would immediately result in playing player's king being in a check is also illegal. So, for example, in this situation, the bishop threatens a check on the white king, and the white must remove the threat by moving the king, but he must not move the king to a square that is threatened by another tool. This move is an illegal move because the black pawn that is on c6 threatens to eat the queen, so it is an illegal move. But you can move the king to a square that it is not threatened by another black tool. Okay? So this is an legal move. The king is the only piece that must not deliberately placed under the threat by another piece. So, as I have already told you, this is an illegal move because the black pawn on c6 threatens to eat the king that is on d5. So this is an illegal move. Okay, and this is an legal move because the king moves to a square that it is not threatened by any other black's tool. Okay, now I will explain the rules of beating. Beating or eating. If one of the opponent's pieces stands in the way of the moving piece, he can eat it, provided that it is a legal move. So in this position, if it is white's turn, the white can eat the black bishop that is on f6 by moving the pawn diagonally like this. As I have already told you, the pawn moves forward and eats diagonally. Okay, and if it is the black's move in this position, the black can eat the pawn by the bishop by doing this move. It is a legal move because the bishop moves diagonally and he eats in the way that he moves. But it is not so much good move because then the white queen can eat it back like that. So this move is a legal move, but it is not a good move. Okay? This is a legal move, but it is not a good move. In chess, unlike in checkers, for example, eating is a right and not an obligation. By eating another tool, it means removing it from the board and placing the eating tool in its place. So, as I have already told you, this is the eating situation. The black bishop eats the white pawn by moving to the white place and removing the white pawn from the board. Or also the white pawn can eat the black bishop by moving diagonally and actually removing the black bishop from the board. Okay? The king cannot be beaten. Okay, so for example, in this situation, the white pawn is threatens check on the black king. He threatens to eat the black king, but when you create this situation, you must declare a check on your opponent's king, and then the black must remove the threat of check. This is a check situation, and the black must remove the threat immediately. So, as I already told you, it is customary to declare in a situation where he is exposed to a threat and cannot be defended, if he cannot be defended, for example, this situation is a situation of checkmate or mat, because the black queen is threatened by check by the white pawn that is on e4, and actually the black king cannot eat the pawn because it is protected by the queen, and he cannot escape to another square, because if he escapes to f4, he cannot do it because he will be also threatened by the queen. He cannot escape to the square e5 because then he will be threatened by the white bishop, and he cannot escape to the square f6 because it is also be threatened by the white bishop, and he cannot escape to the square g5 because he threatened by the white rook, and the same thing is about the square g6. The black king cannot move there because it will be threatened by the white rook. Okay, so this situation is a mat situation, and in this situation actually the white side won the game. Okay, so this is a checkmate situation or a mate situation. The white wins the game or won the game. All tools eat according to their movement. Okay, so the bishop, the rook moves straight, can move on the column G or on the row 3. So in this situation, because it can move to column G7 according to the rules of movement of the rook, he actually can eat the black pawn like this. So the rook can move straight or to the sides on its row, straight on its row, or straight on its column, and in this way it can hit the opponent's tool if the opponent's tool is on his way. If the opponent's tool blocks his way, it has the option to hit the tool that blocks the way of the rook or other tool. In this position, if it is black's turn, the black bishop can hit the queen because the bishop moves diagonally and the queen is on the white queen is on the black's diagonal bishop, so actually the black bishop can hit the queen, the white queen, like this, okay? So all the tools hitting as they are moving, yes, except for the pawn which moves forward but hits diagonally. As I have already explained to you, the pawn moves forward one square on two square from the second row, and he hits diagonally. He moves forward and hits diagonally like this. A special case of beating is beating through its movement, or an en passant rule. I actually have already talked about it, and I will talk about the en passant rule later, okay? Now I will talk about the stages of the game. The first stage of the game is the opening. Yes, this is in the opening of the game. At this stage, the player develops his tools, which are blocked behind the row of the pawns. Yes? In order to allow them to control the center of the board and threaten the opponent's defense. The opening phase also includes the evacuation of the sides in order to allow the castling. So the white might do something like that, yes, in order to allow the castling, the small castling, or also he will develop his queen's side of the tools like that in order to do the long castling. Yes? And you do the castling, it aims to fortify the king in a corner, yes, like this, and keep him away from the exposed center. A typically opening usually involves a double jump with the king's or queen's pawn, taking out one or two knights. So the jump of the pawns in the center to the center, and then taking out one or two knights like this, or bishops, taking out the bishops like this. You can take out one bishop or two bishops, like, for example, like this. Then the castling. So the white can do the small castling, and the king can move here, and then the white can move his d pawn from d2 to d3, and then the black can do the long castling like this. Okay, so this stage is the opening stage. Okay, there are openings called gambits in which one of the sides sacrifices material, usually pawn, in order to take control of the center. So the gambit queen is something like that. And then the white moves his pawn from c2 to c4, and then the black can take this pawn, and the white will move the pawn from e2 to e4. So the white actually sacrificed a pawn in order to gain control on the center squares. This is the queen gambit accepted. You call it accepted because the black accepts the pawn that the white gave him. He eat the white pawn, so this is white queen's gambit accepted. The number of openings is large, and the number of their variants is even larger. professional players memorize many openings in order not to make mistakes at the beginning of the game, which will give an early advantage to the opponent. Okay, so we finished to talk about the opening, the first stage of the game. The second phase is the middle game, took place after most of the tools had already been deployed and the battle is at its most intense in the center of the board, usually while exchanging tools and trying to break the other side's pawns, alignment. At this stage, it is possible to implement a large number of tactics to accumulate a material and positional advantage. The third stage is the end game, and this stage happens when a large number of tools exchanges have been made without a decisive advantage being gained for any side. This stage usually includes a small number of pieces for each side. For example, a king, a knight, or a bishop, or rook, and the number of pawns, and in which the players try to overwhelm each other, usually by crowning one of the pawns to a heavy piece, such a queen. Okay? At that point, the threat in checkmate to the king is small, and therefore the king becomes an active tool, protecting the pawns and supporting their progress towards the 8th row. Because the endgame requires precise play, many players carefully study common endgames positions. Many players carefully study common endgame positions. Okay, so we finished to talk about the 3 stages of the game. Now I will talk about special moves and situations in the game. The first is beating through its movement, or en passant rule. I have already talked about it in the previous lecture, and now I will talk more about the rule of en passant. Okay, pawn can hit another pawn through its course or by the way. Only when the opponent's pawn and not another tool moves 2 squares forward in one move, and in its movements passes the square threatened by pawn. So the en passant move is actually, for example, when white moves two squares, then the black has the right to eat the white pawn like this. The hit is made as if the opponent's pawn has advanced by only one square. The en passant rule is only valid immediately after the opponent's move and cannot be used afterwards. So, if the white moved his pawn two squares forward, then the black has the right to eat that pawn like this, as I already told you, but it is valid for immediately, not, for example, if the white played like something like that, then so the black can eat the white pawn immediately, and if the black played something like that, and then, for example, the white played this pawn, then the black has no right to eat the white pawn like this, because this rule is only after, immediately after the white pawn moved, the black pawn can immediately eat the white pawn, not after he did another move. Okay? I will give you another example. The black pawn that is on square b4 can eat white's pawn moving in one move from a2 to square a4 in the theoretical phase in which white's pawn passes through a3. So if white do this move, then the black pawn that is on b4 can eat the white pawn like this. Okay, so if the white pawn moves two squares forward, then the black pawn can eat the white pawn like this, and it must do it immediately. If he doesn't do it immediately, then he will not, he cannot do it after he does another move. So it must be done immediately, otherwise he will lose this right to eat the white pawn like this. Only immediately after white's move to square, immediately he can eat it like this. And if he did something else, if he did something like that, if he did, for example, something like that, then it has no right to eat the white pawn in en passant. It is only immediately after the white moves 2 squares forward. Okay. So we finished to talk about en passant rule. Now I will talk about the castling. The small castling is on king side. This is the small castling. And the big castling on the queen side. The queen is usually, the queen starts the game that is placed on d1 here. So that is the reason that you call this the big castling queen side. In the game of chess, the castling is a joint move of the king and the rook that is considered as one move. So even though that two tools moving at the same time, it is considered as one move only. So it carried out in two stages. It carried out in 2 stages. The king moves 2 squares towards the rook. The rook is moved 1 square after his king, like that. Or the king moves 2 squares towards the rook, and then the rook moves after its queen. That is the small castling. Castling will be done under the following conditions. So you have a conditions when you allow to do the castling, small castling or big castling. The first condition is that the king and the rook didn't move at all from their starting squares. So this is the starting squares of the game, and if the rook has already moved here and then goes back here, then the white lose the right to castle a small castling. Why? Because the rook moved. So the castling is allowed only when the rook didn't move at all from their starting squares. And also, if the king moved here and then goes back to here, then you are not, the white is not allowed to do a castling at all. Why? Because the king has already moved. Okay, this is the first condition. The second condition is the king isn't in chess threat at that moment. So, in this position, for example, the white king is threatened in check by the black bishop. So in this situation, the white cannot do castling at all. He cannot do small castling or long castling because he's threatened by the black's bishop. So when your king is threatened in check by the opponent's pieces, you are not allowed to do castling. Okay? Actually, that is the second condition of castling. You can do castling only if your king is not threatened by the opponent's tool in check. For example, if this is the position, you can see that the black queen threatens check on the white king, so the white is not allowed to do castling. Okay? Not small castling, no big castling, because he is threatened by the queen in check. This is the check by the queen. Okay? The third condition to do castling is the king will not be found in the threat of chess at the end of the castling. So, for example, in this position, the white cannot do not the small castling nor the long castling. He cannot do the small castling because if he does it, then he will be threatened by the black bishop. So the small castling is not allowed. And he cannot do also the long castling because in this situation also you can see that after indeed the long castling is threatened by the black bishop. So he is not allowed, the white side is not allowed to do the long castling also. So that is the third condition on the castling. And the fourth condition of castling is the king doesn't move past a square threatened by the opponent's piece. So in this condition, the white cannot do the long castling because he passes a square that is threatened by the bishop. The square d1 is threatened by the bishop, by the black bishop. Yes, so the white cannot do the long castling. And in this situation, the white cannot do the small castling. Why? Because he will have to pass through a square f1 that is threatened by the black bishop. So he is not allowed to do the small castling. Okay, but as you can see, he can do the long castling in this situation, because the black and the white king is not passes through the threat of the bishop. So this is the fourth condition of doing the castling. And the fifth condition to do the castling is that there are no tools that separate the king from the rook. In this position, the white cannot do the small castling because there is a white rook that separates the king from the rook. And in this situation, the white cannot do the long castling because the white bishop separates from the king and the rook. So it is not allowed in this situation to do the small castling because of the bishop, this bishop on f1, and it is not allowed to do the big castling because this bishop that is on square b1. Okay, so those are the 5 conditions to do that limits you doing the castling. A distinction is made between the small castling, which is the castling beside the king, and the big castling, which is castling beside the queen. Okay, as I have already showed you. This is the small castling, and this is the big castling. So if only one of the rooks has been moved, it is still possible for the other rook to be used for castling. So if, for example, the rook on h1 moved here and then comes back to h1, it is not allowed to do the small castling because the white rook on h1 is already moved. but it is allowed to do the big castling because the white rook on a1 didn't move from the beginning of the game, so you can do the long castling. The same rule is if the white moved his rook here and then he comes back to the square a1, it is not allowed to do the long castling because the white rook on a1 has already moved, but because of the fact that the white rook on edge 1 haven't moved from the beginning of the game, it is allowed to do the small castling. Okay? If the square adjacent to the rook is threatened, it is not possible to make a small castling. So for example, the square g1 here is threatened, so it is not allowed to do the small castling. Because of the condition number 3. But you can make a big castling because the king doesn't pass through the in this situation actually you cannot do also the long castling because the square c1 is also threatened, but for example if the it is this situation you cannot do the small castling because the square f1 is threatened by the black bishop, but you can do the long castling because there are no threats to the king by doing the long castling. Even if the rook itself is threatened and the conditions mentioned above are met, it is allowed to do to castle. So for example, if the rook is threatened, after you do the castling, you allowed to do the castling because the problem is only the threat from the king, and if the rook is threatened after you do the castling, it is a legal move. Okay? According to the rules of the game, to make a castling, the king must be moved first, and then rook must be moved. So first you will touch the king, move it 2 squares, and then you touch the rook. Also in big castling you touch first the queen, you move it 2 squares, and then you touch the rook. Okay? Taking the rook before moving the king means a move where only the rook moves. So if you touch the rook, then you cannot do the castling, small castling, because you can move only the rook. Also, if you touch this rook, you must move the rook, and you cannot do the rook only. If you touch that rook, you must move the rook only, and you are not allowed to do big castling, because in order to do castling, first of all you touch the queen, and then you touch the queen, you move it 2 squares to the g1 for the small castling, or to c1 for the long castling, and then you will touch the rook and move it before the king, like this. Or like this. Okay? The castling is an important move in the early stages of the game because it serves two important purposes. It moves the king to a more protected place, a more protected place than the center of the board where the battle started, and it takes the rook out of the corner and into a better attacking position in the center of the board. So here the rook is close to the center of the board, and also in the big castling the rook actually is in the center of the board. Okay? The castling is the last move added to the chess rules, and it appears in the book of the French author Claude Grove in 1560. So now I will talk about the decision. Check refers to the situation when one of the players attacks his opponent's king, that is, the king stands in a situation where in the next move he will be taken if no action taken. So this is the check position because the black bishop is threatened to eat the king, so he threatens check on the white king. In a check position, the attack king's side must cause the position to stop in any possible way, whether by eating the attacking piece, whether by blocking the path of the attack, or by moving the king. So in this position, the black threatens check on the white king, so the white is not allowed to do other move than removing the threat of check. This is, for example, will be an illegal move. Why? Because the white doesn't remove the threat of check. But it must not be moved to the square that is being attacked. So, for example, in this position, the white cannot move his queen to d1 because in square d1 is threatened by the black rook. He is not allowed also to move the king to square d2 because he is also threatened by the black rook. So he can, for example, move his king to square e2 where he is not attacked, or also he can move the king to square f1. Okay? So if the white cannot eat the threatening tool and he cannot move the king to a square that is not threatened, and he also cannot block the threatening line, the attacking line, so none of these actions, if none of these actions are possible, the situation is called checkmate or mate, a situation in which the king cannot defend himself at all. So checkmate occurs when there is a threat to the king. So it must be a threat. It must be in a situation in a check position. This is the first condition. The second condition is the king cannot escape to any place that it is not under threat. Okay, and the third condition is there is no tool that can protect the king. Whoever managed to checkmate won the game. Okay? For example, this situation, in this situation actually the black side made a checkmate to the white side. Why? Because the king is under check by the queen, by the black queen. And the king cannot escape to any place that it is not under threat. He cannot escape to f1 because in f1 he is under threat from the king, from the queen, from the black queen. He cannot escape to f2 because in this square he is also under the threat of the black queen. He cannot escape to e2 because he is also under the threat of the black queen, and he cannot escape to d1 because in this square is also under the threat of the black queen. And there is no tool that can protect the king. In this situation, the white rooks cannot block the threat and cannot protect the king. So this is a situation of checkmate or mate. So the black side won the game because he did a checkmate or mate to the white king. Also, there are several rules that regulate the matter of check. The player must not make a move so that his king is threatened by check. So for example, in this situation, the king must not go to the square d1 because in this situation the black queen threatens to eat the king. So this move must not done by the white side. And also in this situation the white king cannot move to the square f1 because in f1 he is threatened by the black bishop. So it is an illegal move. And when he is in a check position, he must cause the check position to stop if possible. Any other move in a check position is illegal. So, for example, in this situation, the white king is in a check position by the black bishop, so he is not allowed to move the rook. This rook also is not allowed to move this rook because his king is under the threat of the bishop. He is in a check position. The black bishop threatens check on the white king, so the only option that the white has in this situation is to move the king to a square that he is not threatened. For example, he can move the queen to square e1. He also can move the queen to square d2, or he also can move the king to the square f1, but he is not allowed to move the king to square f3 because he is threatened by the queen and also by the bishop. He is not allowed to move the king to square e4 because he is here threatened by the black queen, and he also is not allowed to move the white king to the square d3 because he's threatened by the black queen. So in this position, if the opposing player is not paying attention to the check and makes an illegal move, so if, for example, in this situation, that is, the king is threatened in check by the black bishop, if the white does this move, he moves his rook from h1 to h2, his king must not be hit, and his attention must be drawn to the fact that he is threatened by the check. So you must, this is an illegal move, you must take back the illegal move, and you must, if you are the black side, you must tell him that he did an illegal move and he is in a check position, so he must move his king in order to eliminate the threat of check. So the illegal move is cancelled and he must make another move in his place. Okay? So he can do, for example, this move. Moving a piece so that it threatens the opponent's king by itself is called direct check. So, for example, if it is the black's turn and he moves his bishop to the square from g5 to h4, then this situation is a direct situation, because the direct check, because the black bishop threatens the white king. So this move is a direct check, because he moved the bishop and the bishop threatens check on the white king. Moving a piece so that it opens a line of attack for the piece standing behind it to face the opposing king is called indirect check. So, for example, in this situation, if it is the black turn, and the black does this move, he moves the black pawn from g3 to g2. This move actually is an indirect check, because he moved the pawn from g3 to g2, and in this situation actually created indirect check by the black bishop. By moving the pawn, he created a threat by the bishop, because the bishop threatens the king. So this situation, this move is called indirect check. You move one tool and the other tool threatens the king. So this is the indirect check. Moving a piece that itself it itself threatens the opponent's king and at the same time opens a line of attack against the opponent's king for the piece standing behind it. That is a combination of direct check and indirect check in one move, is called double check. So I will give you an example of double check. So in this position, if it is white's move, the white can move his bishop from d2 to g5, and by moving the bishop from d2 to g5, he actually created a direct check to the black king by the bishop. So the bishop threatens the black queen, and he also created indirect check by the white rook that is on d1. The white rook also threatens the king. So it is a combination of the direct check by the bishop and the indirect check by the white rook. So a double check is exactly what it sounds like. A king is put in a check by two pieces with a single move. Double check always occurs when a discovered check or a discovered attack, where one piece moves and exposes a new attack by a previously blocked piece. So by moving the white bishop to g5, you created a direct check by the white bishop and indirect check by the white rook. Okay? There is also, so this is the direct double check. So this position, you called it double check. So there is also a type of check known as a cross check, when a player responds to a king's threat with counter check while blocking his opponent's check. Okay? So the last thing that I will teach you is the indirect check. So in this position, the black rook threatens check on the white king. Okay? And if the white moves his king to e1, then from one side he escapes from the check of the black rook, and from another side he also threatens check on the black king. So actually, by doing this move, by moving the king from e2 to e1, actually the white escaped from the threat of the check from the white rook from one side, and from other side he created counter attack, counter check by the white bishop. So this is the indirect check. Okay, thank you very much.